Today, Jesus uses the age-old imagery of the vineyard and the vine, specifically the vines for grapes. And we can understand this today on three levels. First, he is speaking, as many of the prophets did, about the people of Israel, that they were like a vineyard that God had hewn out of the earth and established himself so as to be able to provide the choice wines for his people. Now, in the scriptures, wine is always a symbol of God's providence, of his goodness to his people. But as Isaiah shows us, very often the people would turn to other gods and stay in sin, so that symbolically, the vineyard would be full of bad and sour grapes and weeds. So over and over, the prophets would come again to take away those weeds and replant the vines, if you will. But Jesus is saying here that this is still possible to go either way. And so the second level takes us to our personal understanding of this passage, that what was true for Israel is true for us, that our heart is a vineyard, and it can either be full of wonderful grapes or lots of sour grapes. Jesus tells us today that he is the true vine. Without him, we can do nothing. And so like him, we must ask for all of the bad in our life to be pruned away, to be cut out of our life. Otherwise, we will be cut off ourselves from that true source, that true vine, Jesus himself. If we choose to allow sin to stay in our life, or if we don't remove those things which lead us to sin, we are pruning ourselves away from life itself. And there's nothing left at that point except death. You can see this when you cut a leaf off of a tree or off of a branch. Eventually it dies, because it doesn't have that sap, it doesn't have the life anymore to keep it going. And when we sin, when we choose to sin, or when we stay in sin, we're as good as that leaf that has been cut off. But Jesus tells us that we are pruned because of the word he spoke to us. He is that word. Because of what he has spoken and what he has done, we have the possibility of being regrafted, if you will, back onto that true vine. Through the sacrament of confession, through our prayer, through community living, we have the possibility of staying close with him and abiding with him, as he says. It's very easy for us to look for all other sorts of vineyards, some that look better, that look flashier. But there is only one true vine. He says just the chapter before this, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And today, just as a branch cannot bear fruit on its own, neither can you unless you remain in me. Without me, you can do nothing. He's not saying you can do some things by your own accord, by your own strength. He's saying you can do absolutely nothing without Jesus. And so why would we try? Why would we take steps away from him? Yes, pruning can be difficult, it can be painful to get those things out of our life that are sinful. But to do so is to actually remain on the vine, to stay living instead of dying and decaying the slow rot of death. He continues to say that by doing these good things, anyone who remains in him, not only will prayers be answered, but the Father will be glorified, and we ourselves will begin to bear fruit. We will take that life, that sap, if you will, to others, and they will come to the vine. They will come to Christ. They themselves will receive new life from what we are able to do because of Christ. They will see the fruit in our life and want that fruit themselves. But without fruit, we have nothing to attract people to Christ, and we will simply attract them to ourselves, which is never good. This is why we must take all the steps we can to know what our sinful tendencies are, know what our worldly possessions are that might have a hold over us, and get rid of them. Because otherwise, we are choosing the path of death. As I mentioned this Easter, I want to focus also on the sacraments, and this is the third understanding for us today. Today, I would like you to understand this as a helpful analogy for the sacrament of marriage. On this vine, Christ is saying that he makes us one with himself. This was true of Israel, and now it is true of the church, that he has drawn the church to himself so as to be one with the church. As a head and body are one, so too Christ and his bride, the church, are one, by the power of God. This is what is presented to the world in the sacrament of marriage, that there is a unity which cannot be taken away. And so too in the sacrament of marriage, the couple must follow these steps, if you will, to get rid of those things which might cause death and decay, and not to allow them to fester so that the fruit doesn't wither and dry. Similarly, just as this plant must be open to life, married couples must be open to life, because it is through that that the gospel blessing continues age to age. In these different simple ways, the life of the family is given over to God, and the family becomes yet another instantiation of that fruit, wherein the Father is glorified and more people are becoming disciples, even quite literally in that family, because a family brings the children for baptism. They raise them in the faith, and then the cycle starts again. But if the family is not open to life, or if the family allows anything in that could allow for this rot, this death, if individual or personal sin is allowed to remain, or if rancor in the relationship is allowed to stay, the fruit dies, and everything is pruned away from life. So instead, especially if you are married, take the time this week with this passage to figure out what needs to be pruned in your life. All of us have to do it. Without it, we die. With it, we live. This penance, this mortification, this rearranging of your life, if you will help you to stay good fruit and not just sour grapes. This good fruit which bears fruit, if you will, in the house itself and through you to the world. Because that's the beauty of the sacrament of marriage. It's not just for your household. It starts there, but it goes forth from there even to the far corners of the world, places where priests may never be able to go, but you are there. And so in that marriage, in that fruitfulness, in that life-giving relationship, consider where the Lord needs to come more fully. Because if you are not allowing yourself to be moved by this word, by the power of the sacraments, by the power of your marriage, you're trying to help that relationship out on your own. And Jesus told us today, without him we can do nothing. So invite the Lord anew into your relationship, into your marriage, into your relationship with your children. Because in that is the fruit. In that is the life. It makes the cross bearable and even sweet. Of course, it doesn't take away the cross. That's never true for any Christian. But it makes it possible. And it makes the tree which seemed like death, the very tree of life which bears fruit in abundance for all who come to it. And that, of course, is the cross of our Lord. Remain in him. In this way, we will bear much fruit, glorify the Father, and bring many more people to Christ, the true vine.